be up for just saying, right, take a section of it out and let people just walk where they want? I don't know.
Because ultimately it does sit with the landowner. It's their, their responsibility. But it might be worth sounding them out, because again, if we move the fence further into the field, then that may... Unless you, it does.
Yes.
And also you want to maintain the hedge then from inside the path, whereas at least at the moment, you theoretically can get across to the hedge from within the field. If you make it wider, you wouldn't be able to.
Well, it's either taking the fence out or opening up the fence to let people walk up through, or I don't know how they feel about it. I mean, I could speak to her, or we write to her, or whatever. I don't officially. I don't know. What do you think?
If council are happy, we at least sound out the landowner and draw to their attention the issue that we've got.
I could speak to her and say,
and see what their suggestions are as well as to how they think we can work together.
Yeah, see how they feel about it. Yeah.
Our members happy that we asked Amanda to make that contact. Amy.
So you mean build a path through the field now, sort of thing? But what about the old path? Can't we just rebuild the old paths now? Stop it being muddy all the time. And stop the argument of them going through the field. Then just build our own, build our path back up. Spend money on that instead of spending money putting gates and fences up in the field, which isn't,
Well, me and Bob talked about that years ago. Just be something more permanent. But
yeah, but you need someone to go and visit someone else, don't you? They got thousands of hills around here, Mendip's and that. Well, surely they got the same problem. Speak to them and find out what they've done to counteract that. Because obviously wheelchairs go up bloody steeps.
yeah.
So if they can do that, surely we can do it.
Lena?
It's not our path though, is it? It is the landowner's
path.
Oh,
yeah.
I thought it was that. Right, okay, sorry, yeah.
I mean, we've helped in the past by doing some surfacing. We put some drainage in at one time. There were some steps that went in at one time. A lot of them. Yeah. But that was with the agreement of the landowner, because we can't do anything on there without their permission, because it's their land.
It's interesting, but over on the East Brent side, the steps have been replaced on this side, on the Knoll side of the gate. The National Trust have obviously been in done work there, but they need to do it on our side as well, because it's bad.
A lot of work's gone on the East Brent side, hasn't it?
Yeah.
There's a lot of renewal work has gone on that side.
It's just
that must be National Trust land then.
Correct.
Yeah.
So in effect, are we saying two actions then? For Amanda to send out the landowner this side of sort of non-National Trust land. We talk to the landowner, see what they want to do, because it might be if they're prepared to let people walk through in the short term, we can reassess it in the spring.
She might say, let's just undo the fence and allow people to walk up through, in which case, like I said, the problem is...
And also chase up National Trust to say, we're grateful they've done the East Brent side, but we have been asking them for a long time to do ours. John?
They've just got to think, to Adie's point, potentially with the landowner, sell us a small path to the parish to allow you to actually do a proper job and maybe advertise it as disabled access, wheelchair friendly, kid friendly. It's such an important part of the village, it's used every week. Worth asking the question, they can only say yes or no.
Certainly can be discussions, but I mean obviously no commitments. There's no commitments at the moment. We would have to see what we're talking about and what liabilities we've got. But,
I'll speak to her.
Okay. Any other paths that we've got reports on?
No, only that we were going to do a working party with the waymarkers on the unclear paths down off the S-bends, and
we've been in touch with Somerset County and are going to send us some waymarkers. So once we've got those, I'll make sure we get to the team to go and have a wander. And we have had a discussion with the owners at Windy Ridge about their area, and they are going to consider trying to indicate to people the proper path line again, that the one that heads out to where currently people are walking diagonally across the field. That's not the line of the path. It should be coming around the edge of the field. So they're going to try and do some markings there so that people can see what the proper route is that they should be following. Okay, if there's nothing else then on footpaths, highways. Any reports on highways?
I haven't done nothing because I've been health problems this month, so I haven't done nothing at all.
Anybody else noticed anything in particular, David?
Can we ask Jason about cutting along South Frank Close? We said before about the hedge coming out in the road. I know if we tell anywhere. You know, St Brent Close, the hedge up to the railway bridge, it's coming out in the road, and we maintain the verge, but the hedge is pretty much gone.
Because I'm doing the one on Crooked Lane on that corner, that girl's house there, near the opposite John's, I think it is, near enough, innit? I think that one there. I'm doing that one soon, but until she gives me a go ahead to do it, but that one's quite bad as well, because people have been complaining about that actually. But that'll be done.
Okay. Yeah, our members happy then that we asked Jason to get a quote for. It's something that we've done periodically of taking that hedge back and then the verge.
We're going to talk about Jason later on, but
We will.
there is, we would actually have a meeting, try and get a meeting with Jason so we can get a clear picture of everything that he's being asked to do.
Also, if I could raise one, which is again Station Road. There's a bunch of properties that are set back off Station Road, which have I think it's laurel, but it's a green hedge that runs the entire length of the road. It's a periodic thing that we write to the owners about cutting their hedges back. It's got to the point again where at points it's 6 inches that you've got on the pavement. So if we could, if members are happy, we just drop those resident houses a reminder that they need to just think about what's on the outside of their hedge, about not just what's on the inside.
We used to have a response from usually one, certainly, possibly 2 occasionally, but the others more or less ignored it actually. But we can try again.
Okay. Right. Who was on the village green? John.
So, about 6:30, I just sent out an email to everybody. There's a few points from my visit today. One or a couple are definitely urgent in my opinion. I'll talk you through those first. The fencing, there's some temporary fencing up in the top right-hand corner, which I noticed 2 problems. One, there's some very dangerous spikes or wires, I'll just show you if you can see, sticking out from that fence. A child could quite easily put their hand up, cut their hand, so that definitely needs some urgent attention. It's also not very well secured as well at both sides. I'll give it a bit of a wiggle, pretty easy to pull it over. It's not secured at the top of the fencing as well, so I'm not aware, I don't know who's put that up or whose responsibility that is, but it does need certainly the broken wire needs definitely urgent attention. So I'll circulate those pictures and send them to Owen, our clerk. Secondly then, just on the more general sort of look round the park, I'll just flick very quickly through these. The grass has been cut recently, it looks quite tidy for the time of year, it's probably about as best as it can be. There's a few pools and patches of mud near the mud or basketball pitch. The basketball pitch, the actual faceplate is really dirty. I don't know if we've got a contract for cleaning or who's responsible for that, but it is really grubby, it just looks really dirty. It's probably only a 5-10 minute job, but with the right equipment, health and safety equipment, etc., but it definitely looks really grubby and dirty. There's the usual litter around. I did my bit, picked it all up, put it in the bin. There is a cone right next to the slide. I'm not quite sure why the cone's there. I'm guessing it's to do with a broken slide or broken roundabout, but
It's the kids.
It's the kids.
oh, it's the kids.
There's
There's a cone.
Okay.
There's a cone.
It's called a plaything.
There's a cone, yeah. It's another bit of added equipment. There's a cone. I wasn't sure if it was supposed to be telling me something or not, but there's a cone there. On the roundabout, the face here, the flooring is broken, 2 cracks in 2 different places. I can't remember, so I've got filthy cold, so if we've got to with, or not with that, I may have missed something last month not being here, but the flooring's definitely broken, there's weeds growing through that. Very generally, the paint, all the paint is flaking off, there's rust coming through. It's all fine and functional, but it looks pretty damn tatty. And it's worth noting it's certainly got worse since the last few months I've been down there. There's yellow, blue, red, paint flaking everywhere across all of it. And there's a fair bit of graffiti, which again I've not noticed. Last time I was there with my kids, not noticed, but there's a fair bit of graffiti. I've sent the pictures through. The swings, again, filthy dirty. There's like algae and stuff growing on them. If I had a toddler, I probably wouldn't want to put my toddler in there in nice clothing because it would be covered in algae and green stuff. So again, that's just a note. All safe there, all felt fine. The swings are physically safe, but again, just dirty and tatty. Another thing, the sign at the top, which says the playing field equipment is for use of children 12 years and under. Again, it's all filthy dirty. You can't really read it. Whether it's correct or not, I don't know. On the the balance beam, the metal thing right at the end, there's some like beads that kids can play on there, broken. It's sort of has some sharp edges on there, sharpish I say, I mean, wouldn't cut my fingers, but the beads and balls are sort of broken, falling apart, again just tatty, and that same bit of play equipment, paint flaking over it, all different colours, metal poking through it, just looks completely knackered and worn out, and it has got a lot worse, certainly since the last time I really looked closely at it. And then just lastly, just finishing off, I had a poke into the gents and the ladies' toilets, making noises, there's no one in there. The gents' toilet, the catch is broken, so you couldn't actually use the toilet and have any privacy, so that definitely needs some attention. Again, I sent that to Owen and flagged that to Owen, but the catch is broken, it doesn't function or work, so you can't lock the door. But generally the toilets were okay, clean, tidy and serviceable from that point of view, but yeah, you couldn't lock the toilets in the gents. Ladies, the locks were fine, and there was a pencil on the floor, which I've removed because it was, you could have skipped over on the pencil, but that was obviously just someone dropped the pencil by accident, so that's my report.
Thank you. In terms of the arrows fencing that's up the end of the green, that's National Grid, isn't it?
Yes.
So I think we need, I noticed that's also picked up by the GB Sports, they've commented on that, so I think we need to go back to National Grid and say either they remove it, if they're not going to be doing work there immediately, or they've got to secure it and take in the play equipment as well, because that's what GB Sports have said, so we'll, if members are happy, we'll chase National Grid on that to get that sorted. In terms of the state of the play in painting and stuff, would you be happy if we go out and get a couple of quotes for, it's been a couple of years since it's been repainted, so if we get a couple of quotes in for getting all the play equipment refurbed and repainted?
We won't go to a screen, I guess.
No, but at least we get quotes in so we can...
Get agreements,
Yeah. I think in terms of the things like sign cleaning and the backboard cleaning, that may well be a working party. I can
Rain will wash it off.
Yeah.
So leave mud from the balls,
Yeah.
stuff like that.
But we can give that a go. Just to check the roundabout, is it the safer surface you're saying is dodgy, or the surface of the roundabout itself?
Two actually points there, that's what I forgot one. One, the actual roundabout itself is gathering water and the wood's sort of buckling, so that is wet and slippery and it's bowed inwards. Sorry, I forgot to note that was one of the other pictures. Their pictures are on there, sort of bowed downwards and collecting water. And then the actual flooring around has got cracks around the flooring as well, so just note both of those things. So. Not, both of them not major issues, but both minor issues at the moment, won't get any better.
And in terms of the surface of the roundabout itself, we have had that replaced in the past. Would members be happy if we get a quote for having that done? Because again, I think we did it last time, we also replaced the bearing underneath it, which I think again GB made reference to the fact the bearing is wearing a bit. So are you happy if we go out and get a couple of quotes for what that would be? Yeah. Okay. And again, on the gents' toilet lock, can we have a word with somebody to just get that replaced? Yeah.
Could I also say in the ladies' toilet, the hot tap, I think it's the hot tap, that tends to be left running unless you turn it off really securely.
Right.
I've gone in there on occasions and it was just running.
Actually, really women too strong. Obviously, John never mentioned about the car park. It needs all white lining again, and also you need the yellow marking for disabled access, because cars are parking there every time I'm in the shop. Sorry, you can't park there, love, move up, because it needs to be seen. Because they can't park there by law now because there's no markings. So I can't really tell them to move because there's no markings there. Look. So it needs doing.
It's done about 10 years ago, I think, was the last time we did it. Car parking.
And we've done every 5 years normally.
And we had it done then because the county at the time had some spare pigment for the use, and they said, "Do you want to? Have you got anything needs doing?" I said, "Yeah, come and do that."
And the ones over the other side need putting straight, not at an angle.
In terms of timing of that, would we be better waiting until we get...
I was going to say, wait until, yes, yeah. But if we can just get a yellow marker paint then, just to mark that one, to say do not park here, because, we are going to get someone that's going to be disabled, that's going to come into the car park, and they are going to go mad because that car's sat there and they can't get through. So So whether it's worth getting a bit of yellow spray paint ourselves.
Yellow spray.
Yeah.
So we're talking about the, in effect, pedestrian access going
Yeah,
through to
pedestrian
the path.
access to the edge of the actual parking then, which is
Right.
what, 10 foot in a length of the car, yeah. From the barrier to the edge.
Okay. Are members happy that we get that bit done with some yellow markings and then do the full job once we've got the car
Yeah.
park clear?
AD,
Cool.
I think I've got some of that yellow marker paint at home, like if I've got it, I'll message you,
Yeah.
and then when it's empty, if you want to whack some lines down.
Okay, sounds good.
And do some
Yeah.
graffiti.
I don't know
Okay.
how I paint have it. So.
What do you want, a racing circuit?
I can't remember what I've got, but I've got links for it.
Painting on the day equipment.
Right. Anybody else got any comments or questions on greens and toilet? Okay. Audit and staffing group, the update on the October meeting. Again, I think you all have that circulated to you. Notes of the meeting that was held on the 25th. Which basically was just doing the random check that we have to do to make sure that everything looks right and it was all okay. We then had a quick look at the budget and precept calculations which have been circulated and we're going to be coming to on the agenda later. There was a confirmation that we're sorting out a fourth signatory for the banking account, and an update on just saying where we were with the Brent Knoll Charities, that there's no changes at this time, and an update from the clerk in terms of employment matters and what's happening with the national negotiations on salaries. So you've all hopefully had that circulated. Any comments or questions? Okay. So then that takes us, our building working group hasn't met, shop working group I don't think has met, Somerset Council member, that's me, so, tale of woe at the moment. So, start with finances, which is basically the main thing that's causing some interest at the council at the moment. So, currently this year we are now heading for a £27 million overspend currently. That's after month 5. Of that, about 15 million of that is adults social care, and 12 million is in the children's budget. So you can see the vast majority of it is in those two areas. The current planning position for next financial year, which is 24-25, based on the current budget for this year and the expected increase in costs that are coming down the track, they're looking at a £100 million shortfall, of which 70 million is within the social care section. Currently the council's got about £50 million in reserves, so this year's shortfall can be met from reserves, next year's cannot, and unless there is a plan that is put forward to the finance officer, he will be putting us in the same position that Birmingham City Council has been put in with the Section 114 notice, to basically say we cannot balance our budget. There is a lot of work going on at the moment trying to address the situation, but part of the problem is, for example, as part of the unitary proposals, it was proposed that there would be something like 330 redundancies that were going to come through from the 5 councils that were merging. To date, 30 of those redundancies have been put in place, the other 300 have not, and we're now a long way into the financial year and we had a year to prepare for it. And now I notice that it also means that the staff who are below what is called sort of tier 4, so you've got the senior levels of management, those levels have been appointed. The staff who are operating at the unitary now are still working at risk. They have not got full contracts. They have been advised they might be at, their job is at risk. So we are finding, unsurprisingly, that a number of staff, rather than they stay at risk at Somerset not knowing what the future is, are finding themselves employment elsewhere. And so we now have positions where in our own planning section in Planning North, we've lost a number of staff, which is now starting to hit the service there. We now have a 5-week backlog in terms of registering applications, when it should be 5 days to get an application registered. So there is a lot of concern at the moment. As I say, if we don't get something sorted it will be early in the new year when we ultimately, rather like the council, when we're going to be looking at our precept now, the county sets its budget in February for the following April, and it'll be at that point that our Section 151 officer, who's the Chief Finance Officer, will have to make a decision as to whether he thinks the budget is balanceable. And if not, you end up going with this 114 notice. What that means is the council has to hold a full council meeting to come up with a cunning plan as to how we're going to solve the finances. And if the Section 151 officer is still not satisfied that that is in place, the government will send in inspectors to basically run the council, and we get paid for the privilege of them as well, which will cost us over £1 million a year in terms of what they will be charged. So it's one of those things where there are, I think, going to be some fairly major decisions coming down the track on the basis of, if we don't make them now, the inspectors will come in and do that themselves. Andy?
Well, you talk about a 25,000 and 100,000 overspend.
Mm.
What percentage is that of the council budget?
So the 100 million is about 20% of the budget. So it is.
So you're at 20% overspend.
Yeah. A comment was made the other day that I mean, we have compared with other unitaries, we're probably about 2/3 in the lowest in terms of council tax. We charge about we're in the bottom third of the level of council tax we charge. A comment was made at a meeting that if you wanted to sort out the budget in one fell swoop by putting up the council tax, you would be looking at a 30% increase in the council tax. Now, obviously, you can't do that because you're capped, unless you go out for a referendum and say to people, "Would you like to pay another 30% on your council tax?" But that's the sort of level of expenditure we're talking about. There are serious discussions going on with government, because Somerset is not the only council that's in this predicament. We're probably in the top few that are heading towards this as quickly as we are, but there are an awful lot of other councils that are struggling as well, and it is coming down to social care, and unless government comes up.
Is it a budgetary issue? I mean, when I was here before, then you started talking about unitary,
Yeah.
and let's be honest, unitary means cost cut.
Yeah.
So is it a simple budget that if you can't execute in the time period, you can't execute in the time period? I mean, that's it.
So part of the issue is, I mean, with unitary, there was forecast about £18.5 million worth of savings that were going to come in. About half of those have been delivered so far. The other half is these redundancies which haven't happened yet. There are issues that have hit a number of councils, and Somerset's been hit particularly hard on social care in terms of, an example again that we've been given is, up until last year, Somerset were paying care homes roughly about £550 a week for a resident to be in there, which was significantly less than the public pay. That has now gone up to £900 in that relatively short period, and it's going to be about £975 next year. So there's been almost getting close to a doubling of the cost of care home accommodation. Still doesn't take the council payment up to the level of what you pay if you're a private resident going into a lot of the homes. So that's hit us particularly hard, because Somerset was a relatively low paying. And then the government, you may remember last year, were talking about sorting out a fair level of paying for care, which meant that all the councils had to open their books and tell everybody what they were paying. And of course, at that point, suddenly all the care providers have found that Somerset's paying a lot less than the neighbouring authorities, and have said, well, hang on, we can't, why shouldn't we be paying the same as them? So we've made up in a year what a number of other people have been putting up over a number of years. So it's almost a perfect storm that's hit Somerset at one time. But as I say, there are other things that are going to have to be looked at. I mean, you may have heard there's projects like the Octagon Theatre that was being discussed. That was a South Somerset project. Refurbishment of the theatre was going to be 30 million quid, of which they got 10 million from government. That's now under review, obviously, because do you spend 20 million of council money on a refurbishment of the theatre when you're having to cut everything else. So there's some pretty horrible decisions coming down the track across the whole of the county. But as I say, hopefully, if we can get out the other side without going 114, that's what we're all wanting to aim for, because 114 doesn't actually solve anything. It just, people come and tell you, you know what you've got to do, and you get to pay the privilege for it as well. On other news from the county, highways, you may notice, they've just changed their contractors for highways maintenance. We've now gone over to a company called Kia Transportation Limited. So they're going to be the ones who are doing the highways maintenance from now on in the Somerset area. That starts from March next year, and also probably wouldn't affect too many people here, but you might have seen the news about Priors Wood recycling centre went up in smoke a little while ago. That's having to be, a whole section of it's having to be demolished, so that's going to take quite a long time for that to reopen. So that's going to be out of action for a while. And just the final thing was just the gritting teams are now up and ready for the winter coming in. So they've got the 23 gritters ready to go, and it's about 900 miles worth of road that is going to be covered during the winter. But happy to take any questions if there are any. But as I say, it's unfortunately not a particularly happy ship down at County at the moment. Colin.
Bob, if there's nothing on your section, can I just minute, please, that I did attend the local community network last night, which is a meeting of representatives from all the other parish councils in our particular sub-area, isn't it? I'm not sure which the title of our area is.
It's the Burnham Local Community Network area, which covers everything from Burnham down to the Huntsbills, Puriton, up to Barrow and Breen.
Okay. There's not a lot to report except that of major concern of the meeting were the problems associated with planning. They'd identified the problems associated with transport in the area, and also they wanted to look further at youth and education and the problems that are arising within various parishes. So those are the three areas that were identified. If there's anything that comes out of it, I'll report back. But it wasn't a particularly energising meeting, but at least we attended and represented Brent Knoll.
Excellent. Okay. Report, we'll move on to the financial report and Owen.
Yeah, the statutory payments for November are as per usual, but with the addition this month of Pater and Nichols being added. If you remember right, last month we agreed that Nichols is such a regular payment that it sits more comfortably as a statutory payment. So what I did, I took the remaining payments between now and March, looked at the previous 5-month period and divided it by equal amounts. So it came out at 83, I think it was. Obviously there might be just a little bit of a discrepancy at the end of the piece, which we'll talk to Stuart Nichols about, if that is the case. But it does make sense for it to be an automatic standing order. And the same with PATA, which is the salary provider, or salary service provider. So that's the statutory payment. I think on that, it's probably a good idea to have a resolution to approve that, first of all.
Okay, so our members happy that we pay our normal statutory payments this month?
We're happy with that?
That's unanimous.
Okay. Now on the variable payments, interesting, we've only just had the SALC fees in for this particular financial year. It's unusual, it's only about May time. They seem to be a bit behind on things. 365.44, that seems to be about in line where it should be. I think they put it up by about 1% or something, 1.5%. So 365.44 is their fee. Water services for the period to the 5th of the 10th is 349.26. Now that actually is a bit higher than usual. It's normally around about 260. So I suspect probably some of it might be to do with a little bit of additional shop usage, I don't know. But anyway, whatever it is, and if there's been a leak or something, perhaps we've had a few little leaks through the summer, haven't we? Maybe something to do with that, but it's certainly gone up. Anyway.
Toilets weren't bad, weren't they, leaking for the thing, weren't they?
Yeah, so that's probably the reason.
I don't think it would be shop, because the shop use the ones in the
Of
hall.
course they do, yeah.
So-
Of course they do.
I'm going to say what James said just now about that. I've noticed that quite often
Yeah.
during the ladies' toilet,
Yeah.
and the tap is permanently running.
And of course, costs have gone as well. The actual
Yeah.
unit price has gone up, so that would make
Yeah.
a little bit of a difference. So that's 349. The retrospective invoice, and I say retrospective because it's already paid, for NewsQuest for the advertising for the tender. That had to be paid, it couldn't be done any other way, so I've done a retrospective payment on that. And then obviously training for councillors. This was the councillors that I think Melina and Amanda went on with SALC on 21st September. That's 2 times 25 and £50.
Okay.
So that's the variable payments.
Does that include our certificates?
Possibly, I don't know, I have no idea.
Oh, you said you were going to print off certificates.
Oh
for
yeah,
the-
I mean, I can
different
do
stuff you
that.
did.
They did say at one
Yeah, no,
stage they were going
that's-
to do it, actually, but
Oh, did they?
I don't.
Oh, I remember you saying
But I
that you
haven't
were
seen
going to do it.
anything. I haven't seen anything.
No.
So if they don't, I'll ask them. If they don't, I'll do it.
Just jumping back to the
Melina.
taps in the toilets, would it be worth us getting a price to have, you know, the ones that you push down and they pop back up after 30 seconds or whatever,
They are in the gents, yeah, cool.
rather than ones that you turn on and leave on?
I guess it's just at the moment whether or not it's worth it. Most places it's probably going to be flattened, surely.
Yeah.
But certainly I think we would review, if depending on what happens with tenders and stuff, I think that if we end up with what's there, then we would need to address.
Yeah, because the tap doesn't cost a lot and water wastage is such a...
Yeah. Okay.
Just,
Yeah.
just on the water increase, it doesn't look a lot. It's just over £80. That's 30%. That's a 30% plus increase on water. So is that for £80? Is it worth challenge the 30? Because we haven't used 30% more water, have we?
You'd be surprised how much them toilets are leaking in the summer and that lot. Honest to God, the water that's coming out of them. You'd be surprised. But taps are like 50, 60 quid a time, and if it's only going up by that, in the next 6 months they'll be down, demolished. So is it worth forking out 80 quid for new taps and labour to be fitted, losing money, or just paying the extra 30 quid just to lose, you know, a bit of water? Yeah.
I'm happy with these pay the bills that are in front of us at the moment.
Okay.
All those in favour, please show. That's unanimous. Okay, and we'll keep the taps under review. Other financial matters.
Right, the budget. What we've done in the past is we've always done the budget and set the preset in the same meeting. But because the budget is quite complicated, I thought it might be easier if we look at the budget for the month and then set a preset next month, because the budget and the preset are two completely separate items. The budget is based on a lot of factors in terms of what we are, where we're going for the next 6 months. The preset is very much more based around the reserves that you want to hold and so forth. So I thought if we had a look at the budget and agree a budget this time around, and then on the December meeting we can then use that budget for you to set a suitable preset. So you've had the document, you've had the budget document come round. Let's get this right. Isn't coming up. It does look a bit of a mass of figures, to be fair, when you look at it. But how I designed it was that I had the black line, which is the budget set for this year. That's the budget which we can do nothing about, and that's done and dusted in a way. The red line is where we are to date. So in other words, that's up to November. And I've included the November payments. I assumed that they would be approved. They wouldn't, and I'd have to tweak it a bit. And then the blue line is the forecast up to the end of March. And that's always the most difficult one in a way, because you can't always predict exactly what the council will be spending over the next 5 months. So that's the one that takes a bit of working out, a bit of sorting. That one, of course, you do have some control over, because of course that will depend on whether you agree all the payments between now and the end of March. So you do have some control over that one. But you definitely do have total control over the budget for 24-25, because that's the proposal. Now I put some figures in there because not putting any figures at all makes it look a bit of a difficult document to read. So what I've simply done is put what I think, I just had a little stab of what might be the sort of figures that you would agree to. But it's an absolute matter for you, and if you want to change every one of those, multiply by 100, 10, do whatever you want to do. That's just your choice to do that. On the right hand side, the blue figures is where I've penciled in blue, the things that I know about. So there are some things like, Jason's contract, for example. I know exactly what we're going to pay out on that. I know what our income's going to be, because obviously we're not going to get any more precept now, because all the precept comes in the first part of the year. So we know there's nothing more of that. VAT reclaim, we have increased that slightly. We should get near 3,000 VAT. That's based on purchases and services that we've already purchased. The energy, this is a new thing actually, the energy credit, because obviously the shop used the bulk of the energy that we used. The vast majority of it, it's about 80% of it actually. So very much a figure in there. We've already got a grant from Tony Hill, which so far is in our fixed reserves. The SIL funding, we haven't had any SIL funding this year. There's been no new builds which contribute to that. But we have actually managed to get a bit of interest this year, because we opened a savings account with Unity Trust where we weren't getting any interest, and because interest rates have gone up, it means now we've managed to put in a forecast of 901 for the year, so nearly £1,000, which we wouldn't have had we not moved it to the savings account. So that's on the income side. Then you've got your expenditure budget. The expenditure budget is divided up into about 4 categories. You've got staff costs, you've got employers' national insurance, and payroll, pater. None of that really can be altered. That's all pretty statutory, because it's all written down in tablet stone. You can't alter that. We have to pay national insurance, employers' national insurance. I don't pay employees, but we do pay employers, and we've got payroll management companies. So there's not much we can do with that part of it. Council admin again is a bit the same. Council admin tends to be things that really we don't have much control over. So if you look at office expenses, again, can vary a bit, but you're not going to change it dramatically. Bank charges are statutory. Subscription renewals, we have no choice in it. We have to basically belong to SALC, we have to belong to SLCC, we have to pay ICO fees. We don't get a choice in that. And most of those have largely been paid anyway. The website, again, that's our website management fees. Audit fees, no control at all on that. And insurance, very little control. So if you look at that first block, there's not a great deal that can be changed there. And then you go down to council admin, chairman's allowance, expenses, again that's set in there, training fees, again, might be a little bit higher, depending on what training you do. The reason why you see that in green, I thought somebody might ask the question as why there's something in green there, and that's basically transfers. So although it was in the budget, we didn't spend it, it's been moved to transfer, it's been moved to a fixed savings. So it's still in our finance, but it was part of our budget. So although it's in the figures, it's not actually money that we've actually paid out. And then room hire fees, again, fairly consistent, but would depend on how many meetings we had that were additional to what we planned. So we know we've got a monthly meeting, we know we've got on occasions a provisional meeting. We might have some more meetings with the tendering process coming on in December and January, so there may be a little bit of increase there. And then community support, which is a very small amount. So that's just basically the admin side. Now the big area, and where we probably have the most control, is on village costs, village maintenance. Now the village green costs are predominantly Jason in the main. Churchyard contract is entirely Jason. Play inspection and maintenance is GB Sports, and any items in the annual report that we do, they do. General maintenance are things that we do throughout the year, but it also includes Jason's verge maintenance, which he does as part of his contract. Toilet block, community shop. Well, of course, last year, I don't know why I got a toilet block. Why have I got a toilet block in there? Just trying to think why I got that in there. Remind me why it's in there. Do you know? And community shop is separate, because toilet block's further down actually. You can forget that actually. It should be community shop actually. It's just a typo there. But you can see we didn't actually have a budget for the community shop, believe it or not. But our actual spend so far is 7096. So straight away you can see where the increases have come from. And I've put in there a forecast of 7096. I'm not expecting anything else there. But I've put a proposal down there at 2.5, but that may be significantly different to that when you consider the figures. SID services and supply, that's Nichols' SID movement project. Special projects, we had 5,000 in there, and we're forecasting 8,694, and that's predominantly for the AMPR and the 2 tree movements. So AMPR is about £7,100. Now, although we had it from a grant, we had a 5,000 grant, the grant came in last year. So effectively it's an expenditure out of this year, but the grant was a fixed grant that we held over from the previous year. So it's still expenditure. So that was the AMPR, and of course we've got the 2 tree removals, we've got the apple tree, and then what we'll talk about later is the ash dieback tree. And both of those are going to come in this financial year, probably. Dockland maintenance, again, don't have a lot of control over that. Footpath maintenance, we've only managed to spend £65 on footpath maintenance, so it's pretty good with it. Now this was the other big figure last year, and that's in green, which is the anticipated PWLB loan. We thought this time last year that we would be paying the PWLB for the loan, but we haven't taken a loan, so therefore that hasn't been used. So we've put that into reserves. That's why it's in green. So the PWLB is a reserve now. And then of course we've got the play reserve, which we allocated £2,500 each year to put into play, updating and refurbishment. And again, that's in green because it still hasn't been used. But it was part of the budget. Toilet block maintenance, well, we had quite a small budget there because we thought that the toilet block wouldn't be any longer. And unfortunately it is still. So you'll see there that the forecast of 4204, sorry, the actual to November is 4204, and the forecast is 78. Now the vast majority of that is energy, electric costs, which of course we get back on the income side from the shop. So although it's a big cost, we do get a lot of it back. But it has to be shown somewhere. Grants we haven't used at all this year so far, which we're considering that probably in the next month or January. So the total is that we start off with a budget of 53,000. To date we're 46,000. And the interesting figure is the 55,000 figure, 55,476, because that's money that we've actually spent. The 70,000 actually includes the green figures, which are figures that we put into reserves. So It's not actually expenditure, but it was part of the budget. So, so we're expecting to end the year at 55,000. And with the rough figures that I've just put in just as a starting point, I've come out there with 53,956. And I've put there the key elements of the increased expenditure is obviously the toilet block community shop that didn't have a budget last year, the ANPR, which is a special project, 7194, the tree worker 2000, and the energy 7804. So those are the reasons why we've ended up with the bigger numbers. And that's where we are so far. So it's your call on which areas there you think we should be spending more on, less on, so that we can agree on a budget going forward, ready to set a precept in December.
As Owen said, in effect what we'll agree tonight is the draft budget, because it may well be, will move to precept. The budget may need to be reviewed at the next meeting as well, but at least this gives us a starting point for those precept discussions. Any comments, questions from members? Yeah, Andy.
We've transferred 14.5 over to reserves.
Yeah.
So at the moment, what is our total reserve pot looking like?
About 61,000 at the moment.
That's 61.
Which includes that, because in fact what we did this year, we moved those reserves across earlier. What I've done in previous years is not move the reserves across until the end of the financial year. So it seemed more sensible to put it before we do the budget, to move them across.
So the second question really for us is on the 11,000 anticipated payment on the loan, which we do recover through the back door, through the rent to the shop, or some of that, I'm assuming. But just as an outgoing, is that 11,000 for the full year? So when do we think the shop will be complete?
Well, those payments, that 11,000 of course was predicted payments to the PWLB.
Yeah.
There will be some shop costs. I mean, for example, Paul Martin's fees, there will be some additional fees from Paul Martin. There will be other bits and pieces as we move forward. And I guess that reserve is there probably to cover some of that.
Should be covered by the fact that we'll be able to show in February.
Yeah, it should be able to be, if that's the wish of the council, they can then use that reserve to pay some of the other costs that come up between now and the end of March. So, any other questions?
Comments, questions?
With that, sorry.
Go Colin.
Just for clarity, sorry Andy, just for clarity, of the £61,000 that are in reserves, we must keep back 6,784, which are our recommended general reserves. We've got to keep those back. So effectively our reserves are 61 less 6, in theory, 50, 54, 55.
I mean, obviously the reserves, yeah, the council can decide at what level they want to keep our general reserves floating. It used to be the case that going back certainly 10 or 11 years, I remember a time when they wanted you to hold 50%. Now it's seen as a little bit higher than actually. So we 20%, 25, 30% is now seen as a more sensible level for general reserves. But you know, again, that's a matter for the council, because if you suddenly said, look, no, I think we should have 100% reserves, then of course that would affect the precept quite considerably.
But also one thing just to make clear also with the situation we were talking about earlier with Sunset, because obviously they're the ones who pay us the precept, all they do is they letterbox it to us, they collect it and pass it on to the council. So even if Somerset was in trouble, we're not suddenly going to find ourselves without a precept for next year. That's something they couldn't do. So we're not like a business in the sense.
Sounds like they've looked at it.
I'm sure they looked at everything, but no, it would be so. Whereas obviously a business, your income can suddenly disappear. The biggest source of our income is the precept, which is we know we will be receiving. Yeah.
Just looking, sorry, on that, just looking at that, we've got a reserve, as Colin quite rightly points out, spend or reserve of, if we hold 6.7, spend or reserve of 54. Out of that comes the play, out of that comes the 11,000 and a bit. So that means we've circa 41 sitting in the bank account as a balance, 40-ish.
What I need to do is have a look at the, and although we weren't technically discussing precept, I have got the calculator here. We can see where we come to. This is the precept calculator.
Yeah.
So within the precept also there's two elements. There's fixed reserves which we've set aside for specific purposes, and then there's the general reserve which is there as a fallback. But to give you an idea, we've got an election fund. We put, as you can see here, we're putting about £300 aside each year for an election. If an election was called that we had in the village without another election taking place at the same time, we get to pay all the costs of that election. For a parish our size, it would probably cost us between £1,500 and £2,000. Our reserve at the moment is £2,500 for elections, so we don't have to meet that in 1 year. We know we've got it there. The clerks has a gratuity which is based on the salary that's paid. That's been built up over a number of years, and that's currently sitting at just over £5,000. And then within the grants as well, we've got a Tony Hill grant which has been specifically set aside for. Oh, good. Okay.
So class of duty,
So, yeah.
election fund, seal funding, play reserve, Tony Hill, ANPR, which is now before the end of the year, and then the PWLB. So that's the 61,000. Okay.
So there was just looking at, because you were saying, do we agree it? I was looking back through, we put 2,500 into the play equipment. And that was last year, we were party to a conversation that's taken place for 20 years about the play equipment. At 2,500, I think last time we had an estimate from one of our colleagues, Brian, who was talking about 70k for 60 to 70k to sort out the play field. At 2,500 a year, that's a lot of years before we actually replace the playground. So my question would be, is 2.5 on the reserve enough for the play equipment, or with the reserves that we've got, is it worth putting more into the play equipment reserve in the play park?
Remember, of course, with the play equipment, we'd probably be relying on a lot of grants to support any major project on the play area.
I think Brian was looking at that at one point, was he? So I don't know what he got. But certainly if we got a grant, we'd have to put a contribution to it. And I just think at 2,500 over the last 3-4 years, we're still pretty light on the 70,000 bill.
Yeah, we've got there's an item coming up later relating to play equipment as well, which will be an update on what's happening with because we were looking at getting a zip wire down the side of the green. So we've got an update on that later on as to where we are with that project. But as you can see, we've got 2 years worth of £2,500 in the play reserve, and then this would be adding another 2.5 potentially, so we have 7.5.
Yes, so for the year 24-25, there'll be another 2,500 going in there.
Yeah. And my question is it worth at this stage, if we've got a bit in reserve, to put more into the play equipment and just move some over, so that we can speed up some of the projects? Because the comments from, John, we've been saying for a number of years, haven't we? We just keep patching and repairing it. And there's a conversation that's got to be had that some of it should come out and we should replace it, certainly the wooden block stuff.
Yeah, I think part of the discussion we'll obviously have to have in terms of expenditure for next year is, obviously we've got the shop project coming through, but we're not quite sure where we are with that until we hear the tender, and whether we want to take on another major project at the same time as dealing with the other major projects is something that we need to.
No, agreed, which is why I was thinking about putting more of it into the reserve, rather than actually committing at this point. At least we know we're building a slush fund. And if it's in the reserve, we can always redirect it if we need to.
My gut feeling, and I agree with you entirely, that I think for next year, probably we just leave it as it is, and then when we all know where we are with the shop, then we can start to
Reapportion.
think about it.
Sounds sensible.
Yeah.
Because the one thing we don't know, of course, is looking at the figures quite regularly, is PWL, the interest rates. They change on a daily basis. At the moment they're running at 5.85, which is about 1.5% higher than when we originally planned the project. But they might come down. And by the time we get to borrowing the money, in whenever it is, March, April, May, whenever the time comes, they could possibly be lower. So these are very, very hard things to predict.
Yeah.
But I do keep an eye on them very regularly to see what's the trend on them.
And so at the moment you'll see within the figures that Owen's put forward for the loan repayments, it was 11.2. For next year it's suggested 12.4 because of the higher rate. It may well be that at the time we do that, it could be slightly higher, it could be slightly lower.
And that's our interest payment. Sorry guys, just trying to catch up with the numbers from last time.
That would be the total payment that we were repaying, not just the interest. So that's the annual payment that would be going back to the Public Works Loan Board to pay off the loan within 25 years. I think
Yeah,
it was
25 years.
based on.
You can extend it, of course.
And that is still linked to the rent that the people that are, whichever business takes over our unit.
Yeah, so what we haven't done in here at the moment is we have not built in the rent figure for next year because we don't know when and if they'll be up and running.
Yeah.
So therefore, it would be more prudent not to build that in. Should that come in during the year, then that means we would have a greater income than we are forecasting.
Yeah.
Because we should have to take the loan out, of course, before we get any income from the shop.
Yeah.
So there will be a period of time when there's a bit of a hiatus there.
John?
Can I just change a different subject on there? Just want to jump out to me, and I know it's been discussed in previous meetings, is the churchyard contract. Just wonder if it's an opportunity whether, seeing obviously it's a decent figure, whether it be an opportunity to speak to Jason and see and chat through whether we could maybe reduce that figure somehow. Seeing as the other support we're putting into the village, whether you could maybe do it every other month, or whether there was a way to reduce that figure going forward. I know it's a contentious issue. We are looking after land, etc. in the village. However, that figure does seem like a big figure. Potentially there's a conversation to be had.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the church contract, it was discussed a couple of meetings ago in that we were looking at the proposed cutting of the churchyard and agreed that we had the information came back from the PCC as to what they were looking at, and at that stage, as I understand it, we did say that was what we were happy with, which is what this is based on. In terms of the contract as a whole for Jason, there was a working party that came up with some proposals, which again at the last meeting was agreed that we would go back to Jason about a potential increase in the cuts that we were doing on the village green to make that more a better amenity for people. So, I mean, as far as I understand it with Jason, we are in a contract.
We're in a contract of 2025, 26. Well, it's beginning of 2025, sorry, beginning of 26. And the only thing I would say about Jason, of course, is that his fees have been the same for this contract now for well over 10 years. He's never increased his fees at all, which is quite amazing when you think about it. But that doesn't mean to say we can't sit down with him and try and squeeze a bit more out of him. But I think that would be thrown back at us probably. That I hold my prices for 10 years when everybody else has put theirs up, and that might be his argument, perhaps. But everything's possible. So, what is your view? I mean, we haven't changed any of those figures on the right-hand side. Are there any that you feel that you would want to change? As I say, my figures are very much a stab in the dark, based on the information that I have and knowledge I have. But, you may have some other great scheme that you feel should be put on the table and added to the budget. and that is your right and privilege to do so.
And in effect, what we're looking at is if you compare the budget from this current year that we're in at the moment and the budget for next year, there's just under £1,000 increase on a £50,000 budget. Melina?
Has this got to be finalised before the tenders come